Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well. I hope you have been well, and I hope that you had a great 4th of July holidays. I do apologize for my sudden, unexplained absence. Life and scheduling sort of got in the way there. If you if you had been listening, I hope you enjoyed our re-releases of my two most recent interviews with Zach and Aaron from the band Friend Circle. I do also want to point out their new full-length album, Suburban Dictionary, is available now wherever you get your music. As friends of mine and a fan of their band, I really enjoyed this album, so you should definitely listen to it if you are into any kind of pop punk or punk rock or things that I talk about on this show that you think that you would enjoy as well. So this past holiday is I am finding myself grappling with a lot of long-term, long-seething sort of issues related to my family, and lots of the narrative that I had been told and given myself are no longer stacking up to objective reality. And so this past holiday, while it was very nice to see my family. It's very nice to go to Rita's Italian water ice and custard multiple times, and it was great to be in Solomon's Island and to see my hometown's fireworks display. I am finding myself now on the precipice of having to confront a lot of things that I personally am not looking forward to, but it is where I am at, and it is necessary, not just for myself, but for those closest to me. I know I'm being very, very vague here, but that is because I don't put stuff out in these monologues that are available to come back and bite me in the ass. But that is where my mind and heart have been relatively recently, is just kind of grappling with some kind of long-seated, kind of long-held thoughts that are no longer the case, and my kind of changing on those feelings. So that has been where the majority of my head has been. So I appreciate your patience. I'm sure a lot of you know I don't like missing weeks on this podcast, but this was kind of one of those unavoidable situations. But my plan now, in the interim, been able to record a lot of really excellent interviews, and I'm sharing one of those with you delightful folks here today. My guest on the show today is comedian Patrick Hastie. Patrick is a New York City-based comedian, one of my favorite New York City-based comedians. I find him incredibly funny, and you may remember Patrick from his second appearance on this podcast. He's been on, this will be his third, from 2018, and he reminded me a lot when we were talking just now about the goals that we were kind of creating for ourselves and things that we wanted to do in comedy and in art back in 2018. This is, of course, several years before the pandemic abruptly shifted a lot of our thoughts. But Pat is realizing some of those goals that we talked about. And one of those big things that we're going to talk about is his upcoming appearance at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That will be happening this August. I'll have links to everything in the description. If you are in Edinburgh, Scotland for Fringe, you can check out Patrick's show. I'll have links to everywhere that you can get that information, as well as Pat's just general presence, because I find Pat to be I'm gonna say a very underrated comedian. Obviously, like amongst our peers and in New York, everyone knows he is great. But I find and he's also one of those guys, we don't talk very often, but when we do, we pick right back up where we started. And so I was really excited to get to chat with Pat and see how he's been and what he's coming up to. And this is a lot of great shop talk in this conversation about his upcoming appearance at Fringe. So if you are similarly putting together a show of some kind, I feel like there might be some useful things for you to glean from Pat and I. Two independent stand-up comics trying to figure out how to be funny, how to be thoughtful, and how to communicate it to an audience. So I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you as well. So if you enjoyed this, you can go to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everywhere you can get the podcast. I do also want to let you folks know, if you are listening to this on Stitcher, you might be aware of the news that came out recently, but August 29th, the Stitcher app is going to be going away. Stitcher is still going to make shows, but the Stitcher app itself is going to be going away. So you can go into your settings and export your show lists to yourself so that you don't lose track of the shows that you follow if you're listening on Stitcher. And this is also a great time to either follow or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. I believe I'm on Amazon Music, Pocket Casts, any of the other apps. But now's a good time to do that before the Stitcher app goes away later this summer. So thank you all again so much for being here. And let's talk to Patrick Hastie. When was that? That was like
2018.
2018. Okay, so that's
17?
coming up on. It's coming up on like 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Ago.
Oh, I got it. It was September 24th, 2018.
2018. Okay, so a little, closer. Yeah, about five years. Which, holy shit, dude! I feel like not only do I feel like I've aged 20 years in the last 5 years, but I have a thought, and I'd love to get your kind of temperature on this as well. My wife's Chelsea's grandmother, before she passed away, she said something kind of, at the time I didn't really understand it. She said, "Oh, it was when we were still like wedding planning before like the pandemic changed things." She was like, "Oh, all the wedding list will completely change. Like, people are gonna die." Yeah. And at first I thought, oh, that's kind of an unusual thing to say, but maybe that's on her mind because she was older. But now I think it was like a prophecy.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Like, she could smell it all coming.
Right. So I was kind of thinking how you've been feeling, especially coming out of this. Like, the pandemic's officially over, but I still don't feel like it's over. Yeah. Like, how's your brain?
Like I said, I just listened to our last conversation, which was episode 67, and this is what, episode 300 and something?
Yeah.
So it's good to be back.
Good to have you back, dude.
The same thing, like, it feels like 1,000 years ago, yet I also remember that day a lot. Like, I remember the walk to your apartment. I remember you had a toilet sitting in the room. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do. I do remember that. Like, the apartment was not quite together.
Yeah. But listening to it, I'm like, well, it was a bummer because that was still 2 years before the pandemic. But I'm like, well, we talked a lot about goals, and a lot of that stuff is just now happening 4 or 5 years later. So, but the pandemic killed me. Like, I shouldn't say it like that because it actually did kill a lot of people.
Right. It didn't actually kill you, but it killed your spirit.
Oh, it wrecked me. Yeah, man. Real bad. And I ended up getting real in my head and got real broken brained and ended up kind of, I don't know, like, without sounding like too bad, I think I had some sort of a mental breakdown. Like, I don't know. I definitely went through something in the middle of it. And then I found out that I had, through my job, I had this like teledoctor thing where I could just like use an app. And so I got on anti-anxiety meds, and then literally my whole life changed. And I feel like listening to that guy on that episode from 2018, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this guy, but it's not like it's me. I'm like, oh, I went to high school with that guy, but it's not like, I feel so different in so many ways, in positive ways. So that's interesting, but a lot of just downtime, a lot of doing nothing, a lot of falling apart.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've recognized and made some positive changes, because I do remember that guy, and I relate to this idea because I think back on it, because I've been going to all of my favorite like punk and emo bands from high school. I've been going to like their reunion and 20-year anniversary tours and stuff. Yeah. So I'm thinking back on like the kind of like depressed high school or theater kid that I was, and like very much in a different place now, mentally, like just in
Yeah.
life. So I relate to this concept, but I remember that guy that when we talked last time, because not only not only do I like I respect you because I like you as a person and I like you as a comedian, like on stage, but you always have like a very like deterministic sort of like driven sort of quality when it comes to doing stuff. Like the amount of times I think you've like messaged me things like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
that, and then I'm going to do this, and then in the next year I'll do this.
Yeah.
The recurring joke of this every so often comes up about this Facebook event of your Madison Square Garden
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's
show.
coming up fast, 2026. We
Yeah.
moved it. We moved it back 2 hours when COVID broke out.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
'Cause-
pretty
yeah.
that's pretty good, thoughtful precaution.
Yeah.
But and I've always sort of like and don't take this the wrong way, but I felt like maybe like there was a sort of like need like a grasping quality to these projects
Mm-hmm.
in a sort of manic way,
Yeah.
and it sounds like maybe that's kind of like mellowed you out in a certain way.
Yeah, and again, it's like I believe in everything I did, and I don't know how to explain it, but like with my weird anxiety, whatever diagnosis or whatever, I still to this day will have those feelings. I just now know the better way to react when I have them. But I also cannot. I can't look past the fact that that guy who I was and I mean that is still who I am in a way, but like for like deciding when I'm manic at 2 a.m. that I'm going to go on tour for 2 weeks with my friend from Arizona and then setting it all up, doing it and having that experience. Yes, it was born out of chaos, but I mean, it was really exciting,
Sure.
There's just a lot of other things that I would do that didn't pan out that way, or when things didn't turn out the way I wanted, I would really take it hard, even if I didn't, at the time, I didn't know I was taking it hard. I thought that was just who I was just reacting. And so that was kind of, I felt like I was always like, every year I didn't get my album out. Every year I didn't do Edinburgh. Every year I didn't tour, all these cities, I was like, oh, these are like failures. But then now I'm like, well, that's so stupid. Like there's so many times like I did I did really cool things and I was looking past them because I was looking forward to something else that, did or didn't matter. And, but also like I said, it drove me a lot and I think it made me who I am. And I'm still very much that way. I'm just now able to recognize when to chase it and when not to.
Right. You can sort of like prioritize and organize the thoughts in your head instead of kind of being more compulsive. I've had that too, especially like when, and I'm not sure how your reaction to initial lockdown was, but I think I had a thought of like, oh, okay, well this thing that I've chased for over a decade, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That's not even a possibility. It would be like if I was like training to be a blacksmith and then the Industrial Revolution happened. So I remember like even in like really, and the way my brain kind of works sometimes is I have like weird fixations where I'll like, okay, podcast steady growth, steady gradual growth, cool guests, known guests, really excited about the quality of the conversations, be really excited on that, and then still in the back of my mind thinking, oh well, I don't like the stand-up nag. I was like, oh well, am I even funny anymore? Do I have any friends? I feel like I feel like I emotionally can't handle the grind of 2 open mics every night the way I used to. I feel like I should be further along. Is that arrogant to feel that way?
Yeah.
Like that part of my brain starts to just, it's like a basket of spiders.
Yeah, I 100%. I feel you. And that was in the middle. My thing was I loved lockdown at first. I'm lazy. I'm an inherently lazy person. I got extremely lucky where I had a temp job that I had been working at since like 2016. And they just happened to offer me a very cushy, easy full-time job with benefits in February of 2020. So I had just taken this job with like 3 weeks of paid time off a year so I could go on the road and stuff. And like more money than I'd ever really made ever. And then the pandemic hit, and luckily I had that job, but then it all changed and my job very much became I still had to go to the office when no one else did. And stand-up died. But at first I loved it because I was just at home those first 4 months. There's something really like, if it sounds like you're a lot like me, where you're constantly like, even if you don't want to be, you're thinking about what everyone else is doing, and you're like,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
sometimes.
those first couple months were awesome because like, no, I was never like, this person's out doing all the shows tonight. It's like, no, there's no shows tonight, and so that was great.
Uh-huh.
But
It's
then
like
once
a
I
real
came back,
leveling.
oh, totally, and that's what I was hoping for, and I just assumed that when everything came back, like once stuff started coming back, I would also be a part of that. And then I didn't. And that was the mental stuff. And my job got very, very stressful because they decided to move offices. And like, when I move apartments, I don't plan. My wife does most of the planning.
Uh-huh.
And so to plan moving one massive New York City office to another massive New York City office and figuring all that out, which I did it all. But then that was when at the end of it, I kind of had this like break where I was like, okay, we got to figure something out. And I was at that same time, I was convinced that stand-up wasn't going to happen. I devoted my like previous decade to this thing. I was really sad, kind of more than anything, that I never had an album or anything, because I was like, well, now this is all like, people might remember, friends of mine, might remember me, but like there's no record. There's some loose YouTube videos and stuff, a couple EPs, but so then once the medication started kicking in and everything started coming back, I actually know when it was. It was March of last year, March of 2022. Emily and Chris were in town, and we did the One-Liner Madness at Bell House, and that was I've always had this weird fear of kind of social. Not like I'm a social person, but like I've always had this weird anxiety of like, oh, there's a big comedian's birthday party. They texted me, said, we want you to come over and hang out at this big party. And then I don't do it because I'm in my head about like, oh, what if I talk to this person? Or what if this person asks if I moved during the pandemic, because they haven't seen me in 2 years? And like, I would talk myself out of it. But then when I did the Bell House, when we did this one-liner thing, I went into it with that fear, but my reaction to it was totally different. I had a great time. It was fun. I was seeing all these people. I reconnected. And I was like, okay, this is working. And that's literally, I feel like things haven't been going well. I'm not like crushing it, but that was when I was like, okay, the pandemic didn't murder my stand-up career, and I'm still going to be able to do this until something does.
Until something like inevitably happens.
Yeah, another pandemic or a heart attack because I can't stop eating, things like that.
No, sure. Well, that's good, because I really relate to that, and I think because I remember messaging you in like one of those like, oh, holy shit, how do I even do comedy anymore? All my favorite places are closed, and I'm sort of like hit a point in my life where I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to stay out late every single night.
Yeah, we're grown-ups.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know what year did you graduate high school?
High school, 2004.
Okay, so yeah, we're about the exact same age. Same thing. I graduated in 03. It's the same thing. It's like I'm a different person. I'll be honest on this thing. I'll reveal. I haven't done an open mic since pre-pandemic. I do comedy, and I'll do shows when I get asked, and I'll go hang out sometimes and stuff. Not that I'm doing that thing where I'm like only hanging out, and I definitely am not like, I am too good for. I am not. I'm just gonna flail on shows, But once we got Jackknife back up, I run a show in my neighborhood at this coffee shop in my neighborhood, and that's very fulfilling and freeing, and I was just like, I can't bring myself to go. And it's not even the anxiety thing. It's not the thing that used to happen. It's I feel like I would be I feel like I would be collateral in a room full of young, hot comics at like a Pine Box right now, finding their voices and stuff.
Right.
I'm not going to build from that. That's not where I need to be right now. That's where I needed to be in 2013,
Yeah, when you needed to get like reps in, and you needed all that sort of like technical, unthought of stuff. Learning how to write, learning how to just stand on stage and be comfortable. I absolutely relate to that, and yeah, exactly. Sort of that sort of unknown quantity of being like in a room with a bunch of young comics, and then also what gets into me, and this is I have really am looking for some kind of excitement and inspiration when it comes to to comedy, because what really has gotten me down, and I swear I'm not trying to turn this into that kind of podcast, but the very polarized one side kind of arguments about comedy and what you should talk about and what you shouldn't talk about. Not only is the argument itself really exhausting to me,
Yeah.
but just the inability for some folks to just disengage from a meaningless exercise. Like
Yeah.
nothing is being approved by arguing
Yeah.
with people like that. That really sort of like that started zapping like that initial excitement that I had from the first time I saw like a Dimitri Martin special.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever felt that way, but if you have, I'm curious, how do you like in this sort of like more zen Patrick Hastie?
Yeah.
How do you like disengage from that, or like not let it like
Are
wear
you
you
talking
down?
now? Maybe I'm just confused. But are you talking about like when you're at like a mic or a show and you see somebody and you're just like, ugh, I can't imagine? Or are you talking about like the online discourse about like this comic said this and now it's becoming a viral thing and things like that, or both?
I'm mostly talking about the online discourse between like the like very like left
Yeah.
politically like progressive field of stand up and the very other side, not necessarily like Republican like
Yeah.
Babylon Bee kind of thing, but the sort of like Rogan fuck PC
The cancel
culture.
culture shit. Okay. Okay. I see what you're
That
saying.
shit.
Yeah.
That stuff exhausts me.
Well, see, here's how I handle that. And this is an old Patrick trick.
Okay.
Most of the time when I see that stuff, it's on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
And what I did is I just muted the word comedian on Twitter. And so I'm talking
That's
since
a
like
great idea.
2015, dude. I don't see nothing, you know? It was a bad when what's his name? Tim Heidecker's movie was on like HBO Max for a while and I missed it because it was called The Comedian and I didn't see it.
Uh-huh.
But and then luckily Elon Musk absolutely wrecked Twitter, so now it's not anything worth
Yeah.
looking at anyway. But I think for that kind of stuff, like I've never been like a political guy, and I've done that thing too where my stand up was always like where like I've had dirty-ish jokes and I've not, and I've had and whatever. I'm one of those comics that for whatever reason, which is not I'm not proud of this, but like I could go to a random town and sometimes like the really hacky redneck racist cancel culture women are terrible guys comedians will be like, hey man, you're great. But then also like the most woke, for whatever you want to term, like cool artsy indie alt comic will also like me. And so I just always been like, I'm just not gonna muddy the waters, you know, and stuff. And I just don't like. It's also just like the way I was thinking it when I heard what you were saying is the other way is like one thing that's really sick about not going to mics and stuff. I haven't really had to hang out with a comedian I don't like since 2019. Because like if I'm on a show, odds are people are on the show that I like, you know, because you get booked on good shows.
Yep.
I only book people I like on my shows, or my co-host will book somebody that they like, and I'm like, well, if they like them, you know. So it's not often that I'm in a situation where there's some aggro bullshit type comic, unless like it's a weird thing where you're at like a club or something and like maybe somebody jumps on. But
yeah,
I just think it's not. I mean, I don't know. I think it's just not worth it. It's not. The whole conversation is bullshit, and like it all just reeks of hack and reeks of like insecurities and stuff like that, you know, from like you can't say anything anymore. And it's like, okay, well, 100 comedians have made that point now in their specials, or like I'm being silenced. And it's like, okay, you said that in your Netflix special. Like you're doing great. You're a millionaire, you know, like it's all just so boring by this point. So it was easy for me to just throw it aside.
Yeah, exactly. Just sort of like encapsulate your way into like a positive experience of it, which is I think the most healthy way to approach it. Because and I know what you mean, because every time like the shows I've done, I've always had a delightful time. Like I did last summer I was in LA and I did Ethan Stanislavski's show. I
Sure.
hadn't seen him in a long time,
Yeah.
and it was really nice to be on stage. I did well and talk to comics, and then peace off and go get Korean barbecue. It was
Yeah.
a lovely time. Um, there's something. It is very much what I think. A lot of this is an overreaction to personal criticism, and sometimes that's scientifically been proven to hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Like feeling like, oh, I did something wrong, so you might attack yourself, and so you feel pain, and
Yeah.
then so some people like either like lash out and get angry, which is the unhealthy reaction, or what I think a lot of times happens is a lot of quiet growth happens offline.
Yeah.
Like maybe you realize you've been like saying something that you shouldn't anymore, and then you're like, oh, and then oh okay, and then you re-enter. It's like, okay, I have new information.
Oh yeah, I hear you, and that is a huge thing. Is you see it with older comedians, right?
Mhm.
Like you can see that like a Patton Oswalt has done the work and has tried to change and stuff like that, and he'll still step in it sometimes, but another comedian that's his age is going to be the person that's like, you can't say nothing anymore, you know? And it's because they're not going to do that work. And there, it's actually, this kind of ties in to, you know, when I was a kid, I'm older. I feel older. I'm like in my late 30s. We used to say like the gay slurs, like the F slur, right?
Yes.
And then my freshman year of college, so like 2004-ish, I was the first time I ever made like a real gay friend. And I was like, is this bad? And she's like, well, I've had it screamed at me a lot, so I don't love it. And okay. I learned it right then. And that was it. That was when we're done. But then I heard I don't like the actor Matt Damon anymore. And that's because I heard him on Marin, like in the last year. And he's like, yeah, I had to stop saying the F slur because my daughters got on me. And it's like, you had to do that in 2023, buddy? It took you that long to know that that's a bad word? And I was just like, I can't buy anything anymore from this guy, you know?
Yeah, like
it's like you got to do that work. And then sometimes it's natural. Hopefully it's natural. It happens as you grow and as you age. And sometimes you get slapped in the face and you got to learn from it, you know?
No, yeah, absolutely. It's and sometimes the slap in the face is a quick way through it.
Yeah.
So okay, so coming out of pandemic, you go to this party. So you're like, okay, I'm not on an island anymore.
Yeah.
So I would love to ask you, and because I'm thinking about this for myself, and it's going to play into what we're going to talk about. Did you have to basically start from scratch? Like, I know, obviously, because you and I've always felt like comedy-wise have a similar like approach.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Same. Like we're always kind of going for. We're not doing like social commentary. We're trying.
I'm not trying to change
witty.
the world. I literally, I'm not trying to like. That's why I hate I think that's why the rednecks like me, is because they're like, I bet he thinks like I think, because I'm not telling them I don't, you know?
Right. Or they look at the mustache or the hat.
Oh yeah, they just look at my whole vibe and they're like, that guy's on our side.
Totally.
So
yeah. Did you have to basically like write your act all over again?
No, and a lot of this goes back to the stuff we talked about in that last show. In that podcast, I know that this is your average listener probably didn't listen to my last appearance on this show recently, you know, not recently. So
sure.
What I would say is, if you're a big fucking between awesome and disaster head, go back, pause right now, and go back and listen to that episode, because that dude is anxious as all hell, but he's in the best place he's ever been stand-up wise. That was like late 2018, I had just done Butterboy, I had just done Knit, I had been on the road, I was doing auditions, all that kind of stuff. And then 2019 was easily my worst year ever in comedy. Like, it might have been worse than 2020, honestly. Like,
wow.
I was in my head the whole time. Nothing worked out. I did 2 little tours that were both very fun, but didn't break even and just kind of ended up sloppy. And then I came out of 2019 great. Late that year, I was in a really good place, and then I rolled into 2020 with a lot of momentum, like auditioning again, JFL auditions. I I was going to do an album. I had already talked to the club. Everything was cool. I was ready to go. And then the pandemic hit.
Right.
So I feel like once I came back, once I knew that I physically still had the because I didn't go up for like, I went up once in the first 10 months, or I went up like March 13th, then I went up again in August, and then I went up again in December. So it was like that first 2020, that's all I did. And so it wasn't until 2021 when I started doing more regular spots. I was still insane, but I started doing more regular stuff. Once I realized that I still had the skill to do it, that I hadn't lost that, then I felt safe because I had an hour's worth of good material that I was ready to record right before this all shut down. And so when I would go and book long shows, go do an hour on the road or something, I mean, it was probably better than 2019 because I'm older and more, I'm better as a comedian.
Yeah.
The only thing that's weird is I didn't have any, I do because it's me, but like I changed so much from when I was writing those jokes. Like I'm the same guy and I still look at those things the same way, but it's so strange that like in the middle of a bit that it is really fun about my dad that I wrote in 2019 that I'm not also screaming, and then the pandemic happened and then millions of people died, like
right.
It feels weird. So I felt lucky in that respect. But then also kind of with that, I wasn't pushing to write more. Like I haven't written a ton of new stuff since the pandemic. I have in my notebook, I have maybe like 10 jokes, and maybe 2 of those are actually pretty good. And so it's fun, but it once I started doing it more regularly, mixed with the medication, it was okay. And then similar to how I've always been, once I recorded an album a couple months ago, and once I recorded that album, finally, after all these years, then I immediately got into Edinburgh. So I kind of have this whole time period right now is like a get out of jail card because I still do stand up if I get asked, but I'm not asking for any spots. I do my shows, but I'm not. And so I'm not building stand up. I'm instead writing this new hour themed show.
Right.
And that is insane and a skill I don't have, and it's killing me in a different way. But so I kind of have this freedom right now to like, I'm not trying to come up with my next 2-minute bit, And I think I got lucky with that. So it's maybe like that's, I don't know where you're at, like, but if you have, because you didn't put out an album in 2020, did you?
I haven't put out any album.
Just your music stuff. You've done music. You've done
yes,
but as a stand up.
Yeah, not as stand up, but the goal I had for the longest time was I had this 5-song EP music EP. I got that out. That was great. But then my
is that Bright Ugly or is that separate?
No, that's
the other
me
one.
Me solo. Bright Ugly was a separate thing, which has since fallen apart.
Oh, that sucks. Sorry about that.
I appreciate, man. Yeah. Working to rebuild something new.
Cool.
Or maybe I'll do the like acoustic guitar guy at the hardcore show thing for a little while.
I got all my guitars right there.
Sweet. Yeah,
I've been playing like crazy.
All of mine are back here too. But similar to, you said something very profound. This idea of like the building towards the album. I've always related to that as well. Like having like, because to me that the album is proof that you're a comedian.
Yeah.
That's like,
and it's just proof that you existed. That's what I think too. Yeah.
In a way, yes. I understand that, and it reminds me of something the most unlikely person said, but they essentially said something like to the effect of like the camera is sort of like a way to be immortal because footage of you will last longer than your physical body and memory will, and that I found particularly fascinating and profound. And it was interesting that it came from Steve-O during his Hot Ones interview.
That's hilarious. That's really good.
So that was pretty rad. And then also similarly, what you're describing, you have this archive of evergreen, punchy kind of like comedy show stand up, which is a very different medium from the sort of from like the Edinburgh style show, which is and maybe we can talk about this a little bit. more long form stuff, more storytelling, more
Yeah.
narrative based. Probably still very funny, but
Yeah,
you're doing something different.
and totally different than anything I've ever done. Even though ideally my plan is like at the end of the month, at the end of August, once I've done it all in a month in this year, because I'm doing Edinburgh this year.
Uh-huh.
Once I'm done with it, I would hope that like a fan of mine would just maybe would be able to see that it's a little more sentimental or whatever, but like hopefully it'll be just like what my stand up is. But
Yeah.
it took me 13 years to write the album, and I'm doing this whole thing in 5 months, 6 months basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of the interesting dichotomy is like you have your entire life to write the first one, and then
Yeah.
the next one's a lot faster turnover. I almost wonder, and I'm not trying to tell you how to run your business, but
Buddy, please do it. Somebody fucking needs to, that's for sure.
okay, because I've been watching a couple of like DIY band courses, and I've seen a lot of things that I think can apply to DIY stand up. First off is the tour process, and doing more of like what some of my pop punk friends do. They do weekenders,
Yeah.
instead of the 2 weeks
Straight,
nonstop.
yeah, in a van or whatnot.
Exactly. You pick like how far can you go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, drive back home on Sunday. That was a really interesting kind of thought process, and it makes the economics a lot different. And the other thing I thought of, if Patrick, is if you're currently sitting on a comedy album, which is I Will Fight You is the new comedy album.
Yep. It comes out on the 20th.
Excellent. July 20th, available everywhere you get music and comedy. So if you have this stand-up album and then you have this slightly mostly different solo show, I think anybody you get into Fringe, they leave with one of those CDs.
That's the plan. That is literally like, and it's funny, that's been my working plan since the beginning of the year. I've always wanted to do Edinburgh, but I wasn't planning on doing Edinburgh this year. I was planning on recording an album. I had that booked since January. But then a friend of mine is like, I'm taking my show over there, and it's like Nick Pupo, and we're pretty close. And I was like, that's awesome. I want to think about mine now that I'm going to have the album out. But at the time, I'm still prepping for the album. So I'm basically doing kind of like you're saying. I was doing a lot of like one-nighters all around, going to breweries and all around the New England and running the hour set, my stand-up set.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh yeah, Edinburgh next year, that'll be cool. And then Pupo got in, and I was like, how'd you submit? And he showed me exactly how he submitted. And we went and saw Gabe's show. Gabe Malika has a great show. And it's that thing where his show was wonderful, and it was beautiful, and it made me almost cry a couple times. But while I was there, I was like, I could fucking do this, you know? I was like, it's not so different than what I expected. So I submitted. Now, Pupo had a video of his show and everything. He had like a transcript and everything. I just had a log line. And they're like, yep, you're in, and gave me a good time slot. So then all of a sudden in March, I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing Edinburgh now. And so then I have to figure all of that out. And part of that plan was, okay, well, now I'm going to make sure that this album's out and on CDs I turned down working with some record labels because I wanted to get it out sooner. And that was the plan, was to sell it at the shows, or hopefully people will leave and then buy it. And on our podcast from 2018, I say that. I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to go to Edinburgh and have your one album done and then you're selling it while you're doing your second one? And I was like, I'm just a huckster out here. I'm just trying to make some cash, you know?
Yeah. Well, I love that what we manifested on episode 67 is coming to fruition back here. That's really exciting. That's really exciting to see. I love that's happening for you, man. So what can you tell me about? So I also love the idea that you get in, you're like, oh shit, I guess I better write a show. So what are so let's talk about this Edinburgh show that you're bringing.
And now hold on, I want to say real quick, because
sure.
your listeners, nobody gives a shit about me, but you have a great solo show. Do you still have that like in your wheelhouse? Like, could you still pull that out and run that if you wanted to?
I could go and do that within I would say within a week or two I could
That's
go out
cool
and do
because
it.
you had a great show. I loved it. I saw it at that. It was a crazy venue, but I really enjoyed it. It was like it was like a nothing. It was like a dilapidated room on Manhattan. Was it Manhattan Avenue? Metropolitan Avenue in
Oh
Williamsburg?
yeah.
Kind of by Kellogg's Diner, you know?
Yes, yes. I feel like I remember this. Yeah, I did that. I did that show in some weird spots. I
Yeah.
did that kind of everywhere I could find a place.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
But I loved it. And so, honestly, if the next 20 minutes of this is just you and me talking about how to put together a show, I need to know because I am in the weeds, brother, right now.
Well, okay. I'm more than let's do it because my show is. I think it's definitely got a different title from the last time you said it, and
What did it
like
used to be called? And if you don't mind sharing, I'd love to know what it's called now.
Of course. So it used to be called Laughing Through the Sad. And
Yeah.
the idea was here's all these kind of crazy sad stories, and here's the jokes that got me through it. It's evolving, and so now I want to call the show. Next time I do it, I want to call the show "Fighting My Wiring."
I love that.
Which is because the overall theme now is not about like boo hoo. I'm funny about sad things.
Yeah.
But the theme now is recognizing my experiences and how they've kind of inform my behavior and then actively trying to change it.
I love that. I like that. I like that title. I like everything about it. I'll tell you this. Naming stuff is the most fun. I would rather, I wish I had a job
really
where people
is.
could just
I
be
love
like, hey, we're 4 dipshits and we want to start a band. And then I get paid to name their band, name their first album, and name all their songs. That's all I want to do.
I would, dude, we would be so good at that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like
I
we
love
would
it.
really kick ass at that.
One of my favorite band's names I was ever in, and we were never even really a band. We didn't stick with it, but it was called Earthquake in a Can. And I just think that's such a good name for a band.
That's a good one. I could almost see them. They could that Earthquake in a Band could in a can could be a couple different things. They could be like a very jokey Primus, sort of like eccentric Frank Zappa sort of psych band. I could also see them being like a really funny like metal band.
Yeah, but you wouldn't see them as you would never see them as like a Radiohead. They're not going to be that serious. They're going to be a silly thing. Right? It's just who's that band they played at your brother's funeral? Oh, it was Earthquake in a Can. That's not gonna happen.
No, yeah, totally. Like Earthquake on its own, that could be pretty serious. In a Can, probably a quirky
Hilarious.
indie band.
And
put them together, very unserious.
If you've ever, I don't even know if people know these things exist, but it's actually a thing called an earthquake in a can, and it was like a little those things you open and the things fly out. It's similar to that, like the can of nuts where the whatever. It's similar to that. And so I just love that it was a real thing. We had it in our studio when we recorded one year, and I was just like, that's the name, But anyway, none of that matters. Edit all that shit out. But I do love, so I love the idea of structuring. When you did your show, okay, so you probably, how long did you just sit and write it? Is that how you write stand-up too? Do you sit and type or whatever, or write down with a hand, with your pen?
When it comes to writing stand up, I'll either sit at the computer and work on things, or what also helps me a lot, just as far as getting the initial idea or premise down, just because I have my phone with me all the time, I just make a notepad.
Yeah.
And there's the ideas one, and then there's the complete jokes one. It's a lot faster for me than sitting with the notebook. The notebook is where I will flesh ideas out, usually around a set list. I'll do the set and then I'll make little notes and then expand on the ideas in the notebook. That's also how I've started doing lyrics. Lyrics have become a lot easier for me with doing it on the notepad. So
on the physical notepad you're saying, or on the phone?
On the phone.
Wow.
Just because it's always with me. I know it sounds.
That's
it was
hilarious.
completely.
No. It's only because it's been so long since I was in the state where I was writing. You wouldn't even have ever considered a phone, right? Because I haven't written a new song since 2007. There's not. Oh, that's awesome. I think that's crazy though. I loved writing lyrics out. I thought that was art. but I hate writing jokes. I hate typing jokes especially. And so since like probably 2016, I just write on stage. I have a loose idea. I talk it through in my brain a bunch, and then I take it on stage. And if it works, it works. And then it builds as I do it more and more on stage. But
Totally.
with this, I can't. I was so utterly unprepared for Edinburgh in ways that I didn't even know yet. You know, like you can't workshop a show for an hour. I took it to Albuquerque. Our friends Sarah Kennedy and her wife Kelly, they have a club there now, and they booked me, and I was like, "Can I run my new solo show?" And they're like, "Sure." And the crowd was great, but it was like the second time I ever ran it, maybe. And it's not good, and it's not anything like what it is now. This was like 3 months ago or whatever. I think I just got lucky with a nice crowd, but like that felt almost like predatory, you know? Like, hey, you guys all paid to come see a stand-up comedian. Now let's get into this half-assed, worked-out hour, you know?
I know what you mean, and we're gonna to give some more insight into like structure and process on that kind of stuff. So another part of it is some of these longer form stories. I would work out similar to what you're saying. I would do it at Jake Hart's storytelling mic, the Dump at the Creek.
Yeah, the Creek.
I would hit that like pretty much every week for a really long time, and that's how. Because I always had like the initial idea for the story, and then I kind of would like write jokes and put jokes of mine that I think would make sense into the story.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would build like maybe 8 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
And then the first time, and then my very like basic sense of telling a story is like you have an inciting action, you have a climax where some crazy stuff happens, and then you have the resolution.
Same, yeah.
And then my favorite thing that I love to parody, but I still love it, is when you do the moth or you see someone do the moth, there's always and in that moment
yeah
kind of ending, and it's always this hand gesture, this like
fun.
outward hands. So I would compartmentalize these sort of like sections of story. I was like, okay, I'll just string these together, and that'll be the show. And then so I tried to do that for the first time all at once at QED. I remember. I think it was Chelsea, maybe a friend of mine who used to live in Astoria, a couple other friends who have since. Everyone there has moved away from New York.
I thought you were going to say died.
No, they're not.
Your show's a curse, and I'm like, oh shit. Well, I saw it with my wife.
No. How's Stacy? Is she okay?
Oh my gosh, she's in the other room right now. She's laying on the floor.
So I go do this at QED, and then suddenly I'm completely uncomfortable stringing it together. Like it's clunky. Like it doesn't have the feel of like a more theater kind of piece or a structure. So I'm like, okay, I need some in-betweens, basically. I need some like profound things to say that gets me through to like, okay, here's the theme of this. And that's something I'm thinking about it more even now, because it starts out with like my parents' divorce and the and the dad anger, and then evolves gradually into the sort of chaos of me like really looking for a friend or a companionship, and the fallout with a friend, and then hooking up with my roommate who is a stripper, and all the stuff, the like going through like basically like I care too much. Now I can't care enough. Oh, and also I've been being gaslit by my mom for 20 years. Like that whole thing. So that's that part of it to me is the next step. And maybe this is something you're thinking about as well, as far as like how do you pad it so that it's a show instead of like a series of songs. Like what's like an album versus a collection of singles, if that makes any sense.
I'll tell you how I've looked at it, because I think you could probably jump in with things that you think are right or wrong or tips. So originally, I'm very much like what you were saying. I've written screenplays a bunch. My album, I could draw it out for you, but like, maybe the listeners will notice, but like my album, given naturally over the years, but it has the normal 3-act structure and stuff to it.
Mm-hmm.
That is a thing that I've always had. So I was like, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to have my act 1, my act 2, and my act 3. And luckily you mentioned that mic that used to be the dump at the Greek. Matt Stores has a great storytelling mic at QED now. I don't do it. I'm not going to go that far. That's too far for me now, you know?
Sure,
But
sure.
I love that he has it. And he gave me a bunch of tips because he's great at this stuff. He's also doing Edinburgh this year for part of the festival, not the whole thing, but part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Awesome.
he's got a great solo show. And him and I talked it all out, the 3-act structure. We went through what it all should be. And I felt good because I felt like I was like, okay, yes, now I can work to this. But then like, kind of that thing you were saying where you're on stage and it just didn't feel right. The whole time I was just like, I felt like I was doing an impression of somebody who performs like this on stage. And it's like, so kind of what I was doing was I was taking all of the things I'm good at in stand-up and on stage and then pretending to be somebody else. And I just felt so uncomfortable. So then I just ripped it all apart and I basically broke everything out into, I stopped paying attention to the 3-act structure while I think that's still there. But mine is a very specific thing. And so I didn't, and it's like for an hour, I can't discuss that one thing. So I just found all the things in my life that tied to it. And then, basically I set up, you mentioned it's not like an album. I set it up almost like an album. So I have 15 tracks, right?
Yeah.
And each track is a different thing. They flow together easily, but like this first track is kind of like an intro where I'm describing this stuff. And then this is where I talk about what the real thing is. And then this is a story from when I was a kid that builds on it. But it's more of just like finding the jokes and finding the right spots and stuff. And I think it's better now than it was definitely the last time I ran it. I ran it with Matt at that, the Pit has those places where you can like, you know, you can do like your
the
auditions
annex
and stuff. Yeah, I did it there to like 3 people, and it was a chaos, which I went into it knowing this one's going to be chaos. And so I like where it's at right now, but it's still just like any tips you have, any like I kind of have that thing where apparently like American comedians that go over there, American stand-ups especially, like me, like true, like I've never been I'm a storytelling stand-up. I tell stories, but I've never been a storytelling comedian in terms of like going to the Moth or whatever.
Right.
And what I read is that like that like Americans try to do this and they just do stand-up, but then like 40 minutes in they try to cry. They try to have a part that'll either make them cry or make the audience cry. So, and I'm like, I definitely, that was one of my first thoughts. I was like, yeah, I should do that. But like, so like, I just get so like wrapped up in it and going into it. Whereas you had some stand up that you could work into it. And that's Gabe. I love Gabe's show. Did you ever see his show?
I didn't, but
it's
heard
called
it
Solo.
was really good.
It's very good. And it's funny because I'm watching this show and then me as a person that knows him, am absolutely taking him out of it because now he's just doing a stand-up bit I've heard a couple times, you know? But in my show, luckily, I got one bit that is a actual stand-up bit that I used to do that just works, and it was never a big bit. I never did it like all that often, but it was like a thought-out, structured bit. And it's like 4 minutes or whatever, and it does exactly what I needed to do. And so I found that basically the album's theme became avoidance and anxiety, or not the album, I'm sorry, the solo show. And so then I'm just trying to work all the ways in there, but it's very funny that like the show's premise is the thing stopping the show. Like avoidance is what I'm is what I've been doing, you know? Like I was so happy we had Jackknife the other night because I knew that night I was allowed to not think about the show. You know what I mean? Like, sure. I had to go do this stand-up show and push and stuff. And so avoidance becomes a big part of it. And so how did you were saying now that you have it as the how you react to it, how did you feel when you were putting kind of the overarching theme together with that? And like, what made you notice that? Was that just thinking back on it or listening to it, or was it like an aha moment or what?
That came from some kind of honest reflection with myself, as well as with my my now wife, who kind of provides like the objective, kind of like an objective voice to some of my life experiences. because I'm sure you've had this experience where you viewed something like very much one specific way, and then when you get that outside point of view, you
Mhm.
think about it entirely differently. So that allowed me to have thoughts that I was not going to have organically
Mhm.
without it that intervention. But when I started kind of like really honing in on the theme, I got it was it was exciting. I started seeing like the path in the grass kind of.
Yeah, I
I
love
saw
that.
like when you're playing an RPG and you're like, okay, there's the objective marker. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, now I'm like, all right, now we're cooking with gas. It was exciting. It
Yeah, I
was
love
like,
that.
yeah, it was such a great feeling. It's not too dissimilar to like those sets you do where you just like you just have the crowd eating on your hand. Everything you say
Yep.
is the funniest thing they've ever heard.
Yeah.
And as far as like really honing in on that theme, then that's when I started to feel comfortable. And then I one of my biggest inspirations for like solo performance
Mhm.
is Spalding Gray. And
Oh
I
yeah. And
and I
I've never
love
fucked
him.
with him. I know that Mulaney loves him. Apparently you
Mm.
love him. I don't fuck with him.
Well,
Not on purpose. I don't like. It's not like a choice. I just have
oh
never
yeah, I
listened to it.
know.
You know.
Well, there's a certain kind of presence that he has
Mhm.
when he's doing his monologues, and I started kind of feeling like that. Like I remember doing it at the
Mhm.
pit loft, and there's good amount of people there. My Chelsea's parents were there, and there's a big part of the show where I'm talking about like uh sexual misadventures that I've had,
Yeah.
and I didn't even give a second thought to the fact that I was doing this in front of my in front of her parents. I was just
That's
like,
great.
and I felt like a real sense of control, but not in like a destructive like
Yeah. Yeah.
me too way, but in
Sure.
like
Sure. 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 Yeah.
just in a like, oh my gosh, I'm in control of my life and of these experiences I've had.
Yeah.
So
You know
that
what?
was a great feeling.
I think really all of that is subconsciously. I know I keep talking about it. I hope the listener has gone back and listened. In that episode we talked about in 2018, we discussed that, and the thing I said
Uh-huh.
was, "You're in control," because that's how I've always, even anxiety or no anxiety. That's what I've always believed about stand up is like, you might get famous and become a huge star. You may never, but you're in control of
Yeah.
what you can be in control of. And I
Mhm.
love that because that's the only freedom. Like, I know I can't tell you if Edinburgh is going to be a success or a failure, but I can tell you that I will be there giving it my all the whole time. I can't tell you if my album's going to be a big hit or not, but I can tell you that I put everything into it and it's good, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so
That's the
that's the thing.
Yeah, that's the main reason to make anything is because you need it to exist.
Mhm. I love it.
Like I needed that music EP to exist just to like
Totally.
for myself.
Yeah, I put out last year, speaking of EPs, I put out it's called The Barf Crooks, and it's 5 songs of punk Garth Brooks covers,
Uh-huh.
and it's not good, but I like was compelled to do it. It was literally like God was speaking through me being like, "Brother, you got to do this." And I got this little thing for my guitar, this little like amp that has a USB output, so you just plug it into your computer and it
Uh-huh.
records beautiful guitar, like it records perfect guitar sounds.
Yeah.
And when I was in a band in 2001, we spent like $5,000 to record guitar sounds not as good as what this little thing that cost me $80 at Guitar Center did. And so I was just like, I gotta do this. And so I did it. And it's that yours is art, mine is just a goofy joke kind of, but it's like the same thing. Like as soon as it was done, I was like, fucking finally I can stop thinking about this dumbass Barf Crooks punk band.
Right. Hey, I think it's all art regardless of if it's camp or if it's like Igmar Bergman. There is
Totally.
every piece of craft, every form of music is a form of art to me. Even the silliest,
Yeah,
stupidest
I
stuff.
hear you. I agree.
That's dude, that's great. Well, and something. Oh my god, something else. The fact that you haven't done JFL yet is crazy. To
I
me
don't even.
because
Yeah, I hear you, and to me it sucks sometimes. But also, man, I don't know what the fuck I would do if I was there. You know, like
be
I,
funny.
I know that, and I'm sure it would be fun, but it's like I'm very aware of what I am. I'm just another funny white guy, and so it's like I would love it if I would have loved it if I could have done Conan. That never happened, and I'll never.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I'll always be like, damn, I didn't get to do Conan. In another way, I'm like, well, it's not a thing I can do, so fuck, who cares? I also didn't do Merv Griffin. Who cares? It's not around no more,
Yeah. You can still do his podcast.
I'd love to do it, but like I would love to do JFL. I would love to have help in opportunities is what I would like.
Mm-hmm.
But through the pandemic, when that thing we talked about at the top of this, we were like, it's never happening again. Some people might get stand up back, but I'm not. You're not.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it did get to come back, and that I grew and changed and learned and got on medication now, I'm like, well, shit. Two of my biggest goals in stand up comedy since I started, I'm going to have knocked out by September, and so it's like, well, then it's all just extra time, It's all just like gravy, And again, I hope it don't suck. But if it sucks, I went to Scotland for a month with a bunch of my friends, Like it's nuts.
Yeah, and dude, Edinburgh, I've been there. I haven't been there for the festival, but it's such a cool city. It's such a great place to just kind of be.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it over there, and I've heard it's just crazy during the festival because people are coming up to you. Everyone's trying to hawk their shows. And your shows. You're going to shows, and then you're like, especially if you're walking like near where like the kind of main drag, you're like walking through, like you feel like you're in flipping like
Harry Potter
in Harry Potter, because you're like walking down these little tiny cobblestone castle steps, and or you're going into a bar that's like built into what looks like a castle as you're looking up. Or one thing I did, and I could probably do this a lot better now that I've been biking and being a little more active again, is I hiked the base of Arthur's Seat.
Oh my God, you love it.
Man, that was really cool. And I bet if I got back there, I bet I could make it to the top.
Yeah. What's do you know the hill? So I went to Edinburgh when I was 20 or 19 with my best friends. We were there for like a day. We were staying in Glasgow. But I talked all about it on the last episode, which the listener just listened to, so they know.
Yeah, they do.
But there's a hill in Edinburgh. It's not this Albert Seat, even though I do want to do that. I didn't do it last time. But there's a hill that has like the Parthenon looking shit up on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's got like Roman columns and like a little thing. And I had like a religious experience up there. I don't know what it was. I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't drunk. It was just I was 19 with my best friends in a city that I never even knew existed. And I'm having this beautiful experience. And so I cannot wait to go back and just like force that. And then another sick thing, literally one of the coolest things that's going to happen for me on this Edinburgh. One of my best friends, Shank, we've been best friends our whole lives. Or not really, actually. We were from the same friend group, but we didn't get close to like college. But you know what I mean? Like we were always around each other.
Yeah.
But I consider him like a brother. And he went with me on that trip. And him and his wife are coming to see the show the last week. And so we're going to get to go do this shit again as grown-ups. We're going to go to some of these same bars and some of these same pubs and have some of these same meals. And I just can't. It's going to be so insane. I cannot wait. It's exactly the kind of shit I like. The only thing I like about growing older is getting to redeem nostalgia. Like all my best friends from elementary school and high school came here last summer, and we saw Rage Against the Machine at Madison Square Garden. And that's, I mean, being 37 sucks, but I had that moment, and I couldn't have had that moment if I wasn't 37,
No, dude, I know exactly. This is very fitting coming from the co-host of the Nostalgic Friend podcast.
Totally. This is just a big long con for the podcast.
But no, I totally relate to that. Like kind of what I was saying earlier, like I was a depressed, lonely high school kid, terminally single, and this past Saturday I went and saw have you ever been to a show at Pier 17 down the South Street?
Yes.
It's a beautiful rooftop venue. For anyone listening, Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bridge is behind the band while you're playing.
Yeah.
The band can see the Statue of Liberty from the stage. The lineup was This Wildlife, Story of the Year, Mayday Parade, and
Nice.
Yellow Card. So
Oh,
like
what a fun one.
a real great selection of like
Yeah. And you know
of
what? That's
bands of that
hilarious
era.
too. I am dead eye to eye with you, but I was like, glad I wouldn't have gone to that show. But only because when I was 19, when those bands were popping, I had already put all of my allegiance into like Thursday and Brand New and like a different set of those same 5 bands, you know? But that's
Sure.
hilarious. I 100% get that. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. And the
It
fact that you
is.
lived the life that allowed you to have that moment.
Yes, and I saw
Yeah.
it with
Ugh.
my wife who loves me.
Yes, exactly.
It was a
Oh,
real to have come from the small rural town that I did
same.
to
Ugh.
like to be the kid who got out and did good is really like I'm like, okay, I'm on the other side of the solo show. The like, all right,
Mhm.
things are looking up, and then like you said, extra time, man. Like
Yeah.
let's enjoy. Let's find some enjoyment. Let's see what else we can do because like already the checklist has been made. The
Yeah.
checklist is done.
And also, I'm not trying to say I'm on COVID-19 side, you know, but had it not been for the pandemic, I think I would have just kept my head down and kept grinding and kept going on the road and doing whatever I can do. And I probably would have done a lot of really cool stuff, but I probably wouldn't have appreciated it the same, you know, and maybe naturally I would have found this spot anyway. But I am who I am right now would not have been a result if it wasn't for the pandemic. So it's crazy how that is, but also like that's there. And then I have friends who like the pandemic was a big deal because it was a big deal, but also it was like, well, they started doing stand up right away and they were comfortable with that. And then vaccines happened and they started even doing it all the time. And so it's like when you started the show and you mentioned how the pandemic's kind of over, but it's not, like I have friends and people I work with who, if you mention the pandemic, they're like, oh yeah, that was like 3 years ago. And I'm like, well, it's technically kind of recent still, you know?
Right. Yeah,
It's
that's
crazy.
another kind of interesting thing I've been thinking of as well. Is
Yeah.
like it was very much omnipresent in our lives, and now I think as a trauma response, a lot of people are just pretending it didn't happen. Same way,
Yeah.
like if something like if somebody yells at dinner, everyone just the next day pretends it doesn't happen.
Totally. 100%.
Um,
100%.
that's what we're doing to COVID. COVID's like the uncle who said something really inappropriate, and now we're just trying to pretend it didn't happen.
That's great. I love that.
But I relate to that for as scary and horrible as the real heat of the pandemic was, like to find some silver lining to it is I think is a real testament not only to like the love of what you're doing and what you do, but also just like to your indomitable spirit, Patrick Hastie.
I agree. Thank you so much. I want to tell you before we get done, because I feel like we're about time. Thank you. You've helped me, even though you didn't like give me a ton of, when you didn't go list by list on things to help me. I feel a lot more proud of, or excited for things. I want to tell you what my show's called.
Yes.
And I want to tell you the synopsis, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Just because I love the ideas of it, and it's also it's like it's like fucking, what's that thing, edging, where you don't come but you wanna, like,
right, you get right up to coming and then you stop.
Stand up, I come up with a joke, and then I would go do it that night or that week at least, and then by the end of the time it's like, I got a joke, look how funny I am, these people acknowledged it. This thing I haven't done in full the way it's going to be on August 3rd, the first time I do it in Edinburgh, yet. And so I feel like it's just like balled up in there, and I think it's going to be great, and I'm excited for it, but also like I'm still working on it. Obviously, I have all my stresses. But okay, so my show is called My Grandpa's Grandpa's Dad, and the synopsis is, ancestry takes an unexpected turn when a DNA test, a trip to Ellis Island, and some late-night Googling leads American stand-up comedian Patrick Hastie to question the truth about his heritage and long-told family lore in this hilarious and compelling Edinburgh debut. Through stand-up storytelling and some light crowd work, Patrick examines how we interpret and maintain our relationships with our immediate family and our ancestors.
I'm hooked.
Fucking sounds like a show, right?
It sounds like a very interesting show.
I pitched that thinking they're not going to take me. I got in and got an 8 p.m. spot with that show before I had even written a thing. And it was one of those things where I was just excited about it at that time because it was something that was on my mind. I'm excited about it now, and I think it's going to be very good. And it's got its turns and stuff, but oh boy, it's so weird. Especially listening to us talk in 2018, where we were like pie in the sky. Oh, I'd love to go to Edinburgh, and now I'm like, I feel like I'm $100,000 in, like, and I feel like I'm insane. Buddy, the fucking place. I love them. God love them. They're great. But the venue, like the production company that's putting on this for my series of venues, they don't fucking spell check, dude. So you just get emails constantly that are like, everything is spelled wrong. Everything is spelled wrong. Every other word spelled wrong. There's weird punctuation. You can barely make out what they're trying to say, but it's like contract information. They're like, hey, the contract's attached, and you can't read most of the words. It's fucking nuts. I was telling a friend of mine about it, and she's like, well, maybe they were speaking Scottish. And I was like, okay. Well, it's tough all over, I guess, you know?
Right. Like maybe it's like in Train Spotting, like super thick accent.
Maybe that's what it is. It's Train Spotting, and he's only doing like speak to voice to text, you know? So I don't know.
Yeah. So the translation is just like, I don't fucking know, man.
Yeah. But that's the show, though. I'm going to do it in New York. If you're free on the 24th, I'd love to see you. Monday the 24th at Under St. Mark's, and hopefully that'll be the one.
Okay.
And you don't have to come. Your listeners, too, if any of them are New York-based. But I'm excited, and like I'll tell you right now. I mean, we can talk about this once the show's over, too, but if I don't know what you're doing. But a lot of this stuff is a catalyst of my whole life is based around avoidance and anxiety, and I didn't realize those were the same thing for a long time, or I didn't realize my avoidance came from my anxiety. But it's all because when I was, and I used to do this joke at Two Moons, so it's possible you have heard this bit.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 5 years old, my grandpa died, and for 2 years I thought I killed him. I thought I was the reason he was dead. And then when I found out I didn't, I was like, oh my God. And then that just heightened everything in my life, and is why I broke up with every girl that I didn't want to date anymore, or would leave relationships going for a long time because I didn't want to break up with them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
everything comes from that. All the avoidance comes from that. So it's a relatable thing, I think, too. Also, it's not like it's not, I found out my dad's not my dad, which is a shocking story and would be a great story for someone, but it's not that. And that's a personal thing. I don't think I know who I don't know who my great-grandpa's dad is. That's so far back that it changes so many things. You know, it's a lot, but fuck it. Come see it or buy the album when it comes out in 2 years or whatever the fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. If you aren't intrigued, listener, after listening to that, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, go fuck yourself, buddy. I mean, keep donating to the Patreon or whatever the fuck, but I mean, like, yeah, eat shit, dog.
yeah. I need to, I got to reconfigure that Patreon, but
It's
dude,
so fucking funny.
Pat, I always feel better when we
I
have
love
a nice
it.
long chat.
You're great. You're one of those people. There's a handful of people that I met at that same time, right when I moved to New York, and you're one of those people that, like, I feel like if I went, which we did, I feel like we'd go 5 years not talk to each other, or 4 years really not see each other all that often. But I don't feel like that when I see you, like right now. Like, I didn't feel like I have to reconnect.
Yeah, we just kind of pick up. Oh, dude, at 100%, man. And yeah, and I always like, because I feel like I always like seeing that you're doing cool stuff, and I always like when I get to see you, man. Hopefully,
yeah.
I think I'm hoping that you have a great run.
Thank you so
Edinburgh.
much. And you should do it too. If you want to do it, and if you started like, and you don't even have to do that shit, you could do something else. But if you started planning now and thinking about it now and taking steps now, by next year, you'd be great. It'd be good as hell.
Yeah, I would love. Yeah, Edinburgh is definitely a goal of mine that I will make happen someday.
Yeah.
So my grandpa's.
But the show. Okay, so I also am stupidly doing two things. So my solo show is called My Grandpa's Dad. It's in Edinburgh all month if you're in Scotland. And then my album, which comes out sooner than that, comes out on the 20th, is called I Will Fight All of You. And you mentioned the thing about like getting out of your small town. I did an interview for this with my hometown newspaper, and it was so
Amazing.
fucking sick. It's the same newspaper that used to publish like my letters to Santa, and they called me and did a whole interview. And at one point, he's like, "When you in high school, were you like a jokester? Were you like a prankster?" And I was like, "Buddy, I don't know what the statute of limitations is. No, I'm not gonna say anything that happened in high school."
No, totally.
Yeah.
Dude, this was great, and I hope you have a great run, and I hope we get on a show sometime.
Yeah, we'll see each other.
in
Yeah,
the near
well, I'll get you
future,
on one
so.
of mine. I'm not going to be here for a month, obviously, but come September, October, we'll get you on like at least the coffee shop show.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's make that work. I appreciate it, man. Thanks for
Thanks,
doing
man.
this.
It was great seeing you. I'll talk to you soon.
It inspires me and really warms my heart to see my friends and my peers set goals and then achieve them, and to do it excellently. I believe that if you're in the New York City area, Patrick will be doing a preview of his Edinburgh show at Under St. Mark's Theater, July 24th. I'm gonna make sure that I'm there to check it out before he heads to Scotland. And again, if you're going to be in Edinburgh, Scotland for the Fringe Festival, check out Patrick's show. Links will be in the description for you, so you can get all of your info as well. That is our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, I have over 300 episodes of this podcast that you can listen to. You can go to awesomedisaster.com. That is links to everywhere you can get the show. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are on Spotify. If you want to give us a subscribe or follow on either of those platforms, it helps please our algorithmic overlords. And if you are listening on Stitcher, make sure that you export your show list before the sunset, and make sure you follow on your second favorite podcast app of choice before Stitcher the Stitcher app sunsets later in August. So thank you all again for being here. If you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can follow me on social media. I am on Threads now. I'm on Instagram at willcarry23, so you can follow me there as well. And you can also, and that comic will carry on TikTok. And you can also check out our Patreon as well as our merch store at awesomedisaster.com as well. Check out some cool merch designs by my friend Mateus, and congratulations to my friend Mateus and Sui on the birth of their child. I'm very happy for them. Thank you all. I love you guys. And if anything I said at the beginning of my monologue resonated with you, if you are dealing with a similar situation, I, like myself, I hope you recognize the best path for yourself forward, and then also have the bravery and the courage to follow through, which is something I'm hoping for myself as well. And I'll have more on that in the future. So thank you all again so much for being here, and I will see you next time between Awesome and Disaster. Stay safe, get vaccinated and boosted, and stop out fascism. Take care, everybody.